So you've got a daughter, Maddie, who was born with Down syndrome, and you post about her all the time with photos.
Having a daughter with special needs, it's a little bit more unique and kind of peel back the layers when I say that she's nonverbal. So as a parent, I've never heard, I love you, Dad. So that affirmation for me was formed around the simplicity of a smile.
Well, hello there, Michael Ray from Kentucky.
Well, good afternoon.
So you went to the Kentucky Derby. You just posted this.
So I did not go Derby Day, but what
Okay.
most people don't realize, it's obviously a very festive time of the year here in Louisville. And I did go multiple times Derby week.
Okay.
And that's what a lot of local Louisvillians end up doing. I've been to my share of derbies over the years. Of course, watched all day Saturday, but
Yeah.
so yeah, just a small clarification.
Such a foreign concept for me here in Vancouver, BC. Like, we don't do research. So I saw your post and I'm like, that is so different for me, even though you and I are both in North America together. So you are the founder and developer, and I'm turning a bit here because I have notes on my left side here.
Yeah.
Director of the Smile Project Louisville. And your goal is to affect behaviors and attitude.
To basically change attitudes and behaviors of human beings with social interactions of mostly, and when I say mostly, that percentage is insanely high. I mean, probably 97 to 99% of just absolute strangers. So when we've done things, no one knows that I'm going to do something. And the thought process there is because I want it to be real.
Right.
I want it to be authentic. A lot of times if you know something is going to happen, you have the ability to let it marinate.
Yes.
But when it's spur of the moment and you're doing something with a complete stranger, it's generally, what the hell is going on?
Right. I reached out to you about talking to you about this relationship we're having between Americans and Canadians. You're Americans, I'm Canadian, with like Trumps and tariffs. But first of all, before we get into that part, I just want to dig more into you as the smile guy, right?
Sure.
And I want to start because Maddie is a huge platform. So you've got a daughter, Maddie, who was born with Down syndrome, and you post about her all the time with photos.
I do. So I'm a father of, as I said earlier, five. The good Lord took one home. And then, having a daughter with special needs, in this case, Down syndrome.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit more unique and kind of peel back the layers when I say that because most kids with Down syndrome speak. They may, generally have some form of, speech impediment. You may have to pay closer to, they all kind of articulate their words a little bit differently. But what's very unique about my daughter, Maddie, is that she's nonverbal. So I qualify that in which she can say maybe 5 or 6 singular words, has never put 2 words together. So as a parent, what we do truly take for granted is that our kids at some point when they're young, you hear those words, I love you, mommy, I love you, daddy. I've never heard that.
Never heard that. Yeah.
I've never heard that. I've never heard, I love you, dad, love you, can't even say love. So those singular words are simple things like yes, no, happy, coffee. It doesn't expand beyond that. So how do you know when you want that affirmation from, one of your young children? So that affirmation for me was formed around the simplicity of a smile. Because when I would ask her, do you love daddy? She would light up, and it would light up with, that infectious, contagious smile that she so beautifully brings to the world.
So actually, I assumed she was a huge catalyst for you of this smile project that you've taken on. But I have one more question before we go into your whole smile project. This is a little bit, I don't know, it's a bit heavy, I think. I want to know, as a father, your initial response when this child was birthed and you learned Down syndrome.
There's certain things in life, and I have talked about this in other, venues and vehicles before, that you can vividly remember the sequence of events,
Hmm.
So if I would ask you, what were you doing April 23rd, 1999, you probably couldn't tell me because it really isn't relevant. It's just another day. But April 23rd, 1999, when you don't know, and you're in the delivery room and they tell you, well, we think, and of course you can kind of see, you have a general sense of what that is and you see. So immediately, and it was a C-section, so I had to end up leaving. And look, I can vividly remember going back to, she's now my ex-wife, but what would have been my wife's room, outside of the OR, and staring out at the street and sobbing uncontrollably because your life has totally changed, but you don't know how it's changed.
Yeah.
There's so much that is unknown at that point. And I can remember the first two phone calls I made. I called my mom, was the first phone call that I made, and then what's so strange, I called my boss.
Really?
I had worked for him at that point for a couple of years. We had an amazing connection, and I called him. So when you work through the process, it is, as we start then in the days afterwards, started talking to so many other parents, and building that kind of peer and support group. Those feelings are very normal. It's almost like losing a loved one,
Hmm.
and the grief that you work through and processing that, and then trying to understand, working through how our lives have changed. And I would tell you, the first week, albeit hard, was easy because Maddie stayed for a week in the hospital and working through some, very minor things that are somewhat normal and why they keep kids' lungs and things. Um, and that week, even though you're kind of going back and forth, wasn't that hard. But when you come home, I think that entire weight, came crashing down.
Well, because your life
And for
changed as
me,
you know
it's
it.
my ex-wife got over it, and I think this is sometimes a mother thing. Kind of worked through it almost immediately. Where I look back and tell you, it took me probably a couple of months,
Hmm.
to kind of work through all
Yeah.
the changes that we were experiencing now as a family of four.
So I'm asking you that question. I don't know if you saw me tearing up, and I'm going to start
Yeah.
crying. I'm not intending to. I have deformed fingers and toes. And when I was born, my dad cried because of this is going to be hard. Like that's why I'm asking you that question. Is this like you've got this little baby in front of you and you know there's going to be hardships. And in your case, it was you also are going to have a completely different life. In my case, it would be like, well, she's never going to play piano or guitar. Yours is so much more. And I think the
But
beauty
you
of
know what?
that,
But you know what?
yep.
I think part of it as a parent, and where there are similarities, was processing and working through those feelings and emotions as a parent of how they're going to treat my kid.
Totally. Yep.
How are they going to treat
Absolutely.
my daughter?
Yep.
In that case, and at what point am I going to have to go upside somebody's head for how
Yeah.
they treat my child?
Yeah, for sure.
Kind of thing. So
Yeah.
regardless of what our circumstances are in intellectual disabilities or physical disabilities, parents, I think it's very natural when we're very
Yeah.
protective of our children.
You know what? It's also one more thing. It's the death of a dream. You have a
I
child, you're expecting
Well
this,
said.
this,
Yeah,
this, this.
we have expectations and
It's,
hopes and
yeah,
dreams, and yeah.
it's the death of expectation. In my case, like you don't think, I mean, I have it's a different situation, I think, but you still have expectations, like what they're going to be able to do, what, how they're going to
It's
progress.
so true.
Yeah.
And look, you're obviously at that point now where you laugh about it. Okay, she's not going to play a guitar or do
Yeah.
certain things in
Yeah.
life, and I think for me, I I use those things at times kind of as a crutch, and woe me,
Mm,
well, you don't understand what it's like,
yeah.
and we can look at, where I have graduated well beyond that, and I look at the infinite blessings,
Yeah.
that it has brought me and taught me. But at one point in time, I wasn't living that.
Well, and you don't see it until things happen, and you don't know in the moment of this is actually going to be your superpower, and this is going to be your strength, and this is going to be your resilience, and this is going to be you rising out of ashes to make beauty out
I
of
love
that.
that you asked that because as we spent a few minutes before we started, um, as many podcasts as I've been on, I've never been asked that question.
I like
And
asking
I will tell you
deep
that
questions.
it was very real for me that day,
Yeah.
and it is hard not to
Yeah.
get
Yeah.
emotional because
Yeah.
a lot of what I've done and experienced now in life, at times when I talk about it, it takes me back there, and I can
Yeah.
feel what
Yeah.
it was like that day.
And you know, the bigger story is we have death of expectations and we have deaths of dreams, and we have no idea what's coming in the beauty later on from that. We have no idea
It's
how that's
so
going to
true,
create
so
beauty.
true. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so you took that. So I specifically too wanted to talk about Maddie, and I have my own personal experience, which is why I asked that question. But I want to take that. So you have this beautiful daughter, and you post about her all the time. Talk to me about how you started a foundation to smile and to. I interpret this as bringing joy at a cerebral and cellular level. So talk to me about the progress of getting into that.
So it had to intersect with something else to really bring the profoundness of the impact that my daughter had in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I want to rewind for just a hot second, in which, when I talk about what it intersected with, was I think when I really started seeing the impact of my daughter and experiencing the joy was when I was at one of the lowest points of my life. And it was, I vividly remember this, again, it was 2014. So it was 4 or 5 years before anything related to wanting to make the world smile,
Yeah.
kind of thing. But understanding the impact, and really when I'm talking about being low is talking about, making decisions in which, look, I want to exit Earth. My life has no value.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but for me, the two constants that kind of pulled me through that were Maddie and were my faith.
Mm-hmm.
And I can vividly remember when I wanted to go home that night, and I had the means because I have a weapon, of going, this is the night. And I laugh about that night a little bit now because I parked in front of a church and I didn't have the what I would call the intestinal fortitude to go inside, but I sat there for an hour weeping in the car.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that in that moment, if you're a person of faith, that God spoke to me and that, I have big plans for you. Um, you know, be patient, a lot of those things that you feel and hear when God is speaking to you. But we want those things as human beings a lot of times. We want the immediacy, We don't want to put in the work. So I rewinded because when I got to 2018, in which I left the office on a cool February morning because I wanted chili for lunch,
Mm-hmm.
I went to Wendy's. So I guess it would be the equivalent. You probably have Wendy's up there, but I know
We
Canada. Then,
do.
then enough enough. Imagine you want to roll to Tim Hortons to get a warm cup of coffee
Yep.
or a chili. Okay, and that's what it was for me. But it was the interaction of a drive-through worker
Hmm.
that was infectious, and it was so infectious that you really that I openly wept again, having conversations with God and
Mm-hmm.
trying to understand the importance of it, and knowing that the power of a smile and the impact it had from a nonverbal little girl and now a complete stranger.
Yeah.
And I took days to reflect and pray on it, and I was like, it's this simple. It's we intersect with so many strangers sometimes in our daily routines of whether, again, it's getting that cup of coffee, running to the grocery store, getting gas. I mean, I could give you an endless list. We intersect with people and we never know what's going on in their life. For me, I had a lot going on, but the simplicity of Chantrell at a Wendy's drive-through left a lasting impact, in which, we dismiss so many times these things and think that one person can't change our life, or one event can, or as strange as it would be going through a drive-through. But I can sit here and tell you the power of one for me, that Chantrell changed my life, because I
Wow.
understood then how then it's kind of married between Maddie and Chantrell. I took a picture at that Wendy's drive-through that day,
Hmm.
and then about a week later, I happened to be at the gym. I'll never forget a handful of the first ones that I took, and all of a sudden I ran into a boy with Down syndrome, and next thing I know, I don't know why, I felt compelled to take a picture. So as I started doing this, again, I never knew the where, the what, the when, the how, the why, the randomness behind it. They were just pictures. But I felt in these simple moments of navigating, again, coffee houses, grocery stores, I felt, for me, a man of faith, that it was like this quiet tap of the Holy Spirit going, no, you're supposed to have this really quick interaction and take a picture, because I found value and joy in these moments. So that's how it started. And then I went several months without sharing them, and I started making a decision going, based upon just having casual conversation with my oldest daughter. And she was like, Dad, you need to share these to social media.
Mm.
So I started sharing those to social media, and then I started learning a little bit more, where I may have ran into, you at Tim Hortons, but I would go, tell me something about you that I could share with the world
Hmm.
about what makes you special or what makes you amazing. So I started doing that. Now, I literally did this for 18 months.
Just went all around.
And again, there was no rhyme or reason. Some days I took 2 pictures. Sometimes I went 2 weeks, because
Yeah.
again, I wasn't chasing going, oh dear Lord, I haven't taken a picture in 2 weeks. I got to go out today and I got to find somebody. It was through the normal course and activity of just living and being in the moment. I'll give you one profound story of those pictures, and they're countless,
Hmm.
in which I was driving at that point in time for Lyft and Uber, and I stopped at Starbucks. I'm like, I need to chill for 30 to 45 minutes. And I was sitting there, and in walks this dude. I mean, he looked like Santa Claus in cowboy boots and a cowboy hat.
Yeah.
And he goes into the bathroom, and I was like, this is my guy. I'm like, I have got to introduce myself. And I did. I had about a really quick 6 to 8 second elevator pitch, because again, we're talking about what I said earlier, complete strangers.
Hmm.
And I really just said, hey, I'm taking pictures with strangers because I believe in the impact and influence of changing attitudes and behaviors by sharing with the world. I would love if you would smile with me today. So I do that. And I gave people this little calling card that was all about smiling and be the reason someone smiles. And it had my contact information on there. And a day later, he sent me a DM, and he goes, I want to tell you how profound and what that meant to me, because he goes, I was trying to find a place to go to the bathroom. And he's like, why
Wow.
not a Starbucks?
Hmm.
So he goes to the bathroom in a Starbucks, but he goes, what you don't understand was I just left the cemetery burying my father.
Oh.
And here there is this complete stranger, and all he wants to do in a short 2 to 3 minute interaction was just smile with me. He goes, I can't thank you
Wow.
enough in stopping in that moment. So, again, that's where the impact of just the simplicity of taking still images. So I did that again. Why? I know. I mean, I started in February of 18, and then August of 2019, I was like, how would that look if I did a random act of kindness
Right.
for a stranger?
And then exploded. Okay, can I just tell you, you are completely describing my works. One of my taglines is how daily encounters bring joy, meaning, and might just make this world a better place. That's on my business card right now, Michael. It's those moments. I actually just have a post set about it, of those daily encounters, like a stranger on the street, a stranger in the coffee shop, and these connections of joy and meaning and making this world better. That's exactly what you are describing.
I have two taglines, and the other one is you can be so happy that when others see you, they become happy too. It's
Yeah.
again, and it's the premise of the nonverbal communication and energy that we give off, and in most cases we dismiss because we're going about our day,
Yeah. Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
in everything we do, and we don't think about it yet. The times in which we pull up to the stoplight and go, man, the person next to me may just found out they had cancer, or that they lost
Yeah.
their job, or any of these things that we deal with in life.
For sure. It's also, you know what it is too. I think at its deeper cellular level is it's authentic connection with joy.
Oh,
It's
100,
authentic. Like it's
100%.
simple. It's you're not
Yeah.
having some deep like couch talk, but it's just that simple connection with people in this world together.
It is so true. And most of the time, and again, another, life lesson from Maddie is that she doesn't deal with the simple stress and anxiety of life. And when I say simple, I'll make it as mundane as she doesn't have to worry about what she's eating for dinner. And
Right.
sometimes as adults, we stress out, what are we eating tonight?
She doesn't have to
We don't have to
worry.
overthink it,
Yeah.
but she doesn't have that, or when COVID happened, at times I would be like, you don't care because you're home with your family and life is just always good. So you don't worry
Right.
about, well, I have to go, to the grocery store and stand 6 feet away from people and I can't get on an airplane or whatever it is.
The beauty of the simplicity in that. That's what I've always loved about Down syndrome kids and people is there's just such a beautiful simplicity that we have so much to learn from that. So much.
I 100%, I 1,000% concur with that. Yeah, again, I think I said earlier the life lessons that she, and not just her, but a lot of her friends who have Down syndrome that have
Mm,
become part of our family, over the years, and things that I see and learn from them.
it's so much.
It's amazing
It
what
is.
they
And
teach.
yeah, it is. Okay, so I have one more question about
Yeah.
smiling, and then I want to go into you and I, American Canadian, sitting here with like Trump's now going to tear up Hollywood movies. Um, I want, I want to know what a smile does to Maddie.
So I would tell you a smile to Maddie is the affirmation of love.
Hmm.
And I use that, you know, honestly almost in every singular social media post that I put out there. About a third are constant that I never change that messaging. And that's one
Hmm.
part of that third is that I put a smile equals love. Because again, for me, it's the way to non-verbally speak to someone else and again without saying I love you, that I have some form of affinity, feelings, emotions, you know, towards you. And again, just the simplicity of imagine, again, if you're walking on, I'll make it Canadian, you're walking out of a Tim Hortons and you could make that choice of, do I want to hold the door and smile, or do I want to let them go about, their day? And it doesn't take but barely an ounce of energy to hold the door. And then again, we pick up on visual cues without even saying good morning. You know, you don't have to speak. So again, that for me was learned behavior.
Hmm.
And I've often spoke of that in which it's beyond natural now. It's ridiculous. But at one point in time, you have to create new habits, to the point where, it's not necessarily intentional, it's natural, it's habitual. And Maddie's just always that way. She truly is constantly about smiling and joy, unless she's
Hmm.
physically hurting and sick, which is
Right, right.
minimal.
Yeah.
So we live it.
We have, I think, so much to learn because I think she's showing what we all want and need because within her simplicity. I said this, I had a student once in grade 1. who was like crying, sobbing in grade one, had to go back after the holidays. I mean, a sobbing mess. And I laughed at the dad. I'm like, well, we're all doing that on the inside, but we can't do that as adults, right? I'm here after holidays too. It's just like we learn,
Right.
right? Like she's doing what we're all thinking that we're not allowed to do it, in our 40s. Like you said, that's for her, it's showing that she's loved, and that human interaction and connection, that smile I think it's just brings so much purpose and joy in that little tiny moment with a stranger.
I mean, well said. And, it's no different too, because I've said this to my kids. If you want to become an insanely positive person, it doesn't mean like I'm going to think about it all night and wake up tomorrow morning and that's how it's going to be. But what can we continually do in our lives
Yep.
day in and day
Yep.
out to reinforce those behaviors? And I think, Maddie, because of her, um, I hate to use even the term disability, but it is what it is. She has an intellectual disability. Doesn't have to think about it because that's just how she's hardwired. And sometimes us normal people, do, but you get to that point, to where it just becomes so natural. So if you continue to consume positive, joyful things,
Yep.
you're going to change who you are. No different if you
Yep.
got to lose 50 pounds. It doesn't happen by the first day in the gym.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we get frustrated going, but it's the small daily things that we continue to focus on and do to where it just becomes so natural.
For sure. Okay, let's move now to this cantankerous situation we're in right now between US and Canada. Because I said to you, my goal is how can we build connection in this moment right now, US to Canada? Now, I'm just going to recap a little bit for you of what's happening here. So I don't know if you're aware. My friend was just saying, have you seen the grocery store strawberries? All the California strawberries right now are just sitting piled. All the Mexican strawberries are gone. All of our like the government liquor stores have pulled out any US alcohol. It's gone. And it's only sold to the restaurants. And the border towns are hurting. There was a woman, I get packages off of eBay, and I found out that this one woman calls from Canada to say, I hate Trump. I'm not picking up my bikini. Like, I showed Trump, and it's a $200 package. And the woman called her and is refusing to pick it up. And, tourism and people canceling trips to the States. And I feel it so much more because we go to the States. We've gone to the States a lot. And it's just this growing thing of Canadians because of tariffs and 51st state. So I want to talk to you about, well, we've also got like there's broken friendships, there's broken relationships, and there's broken families, and there's broken tourism. So here we go. In light of what we've just talked about, what you've said, how does your quest for a smile relate to what is happening right now with our two countries in terms of Canadians really refusing to go into the States, refusing to purchase US products? And it's not because of the Americans, it's because of the political, legislation and tariff.
I'm fascinated by this. And I will tell you that I'll go back first to Maddie again. And the reason being is because I think that, as I talked about it just a second ago, how she's hardwired. She's hardwired for unconditional love. So my take on that is when you're hardwired for unconditional love, what can make it challenging to love another? Judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So therefore then, if I told you, and I have a handful of things that I say, and one of the things that I say quite frequently, almost on a daily basis, is your perception is your reality, which makes it true for you, but doesn't mean it's actually true. So therefore then, and I've never shared this on a podcast or openly on social media, so I'll share this today, and that is, yeah, I voted for Trump. Mm-hmm. But I would tell you what allows me to do things differently is I like to think like Maddie, and that is, so I've done hundreds of random acts of kindness and taken probably a couple hundred pictures with complete strangers. And I never asked them what their religion is, what their political affiliation is, mm-hmm. because again, I try to find that space in which I'm not here to judge.
Hmm.
So therefore, then, if I'm not here to judge, I have the ability to love.
Hmm.
So, I guess when I get asked that, um, yeah, I mean, we're certainly going through challenging times. So if Maddie can find that space to openly love every human being, and I pull in faith now, and that is, you know, what separates us from Christ more than anything? I believe it's two things. He asked us to love our neighbor as ourself. So even if you remove religion and just loving our neighbor as ourself, you can't judge. So just because of my neighbor, if I was a liberal and he voted for Trump or vice versa, that may impact how I treat them.
Hmm.
So you have to remove that from the equation. The other thing with Maddie that I consider very unique is, and this is the second piece, is that sin, keeps us from God. So if you're infinite love and sin separates us from God, so if you're kind of judging and you're starting to treat someone differently because of their ideology, and again, we spoke earlier today, off camera about transgender, though. So then, somebody asked me to go do a random act of kindness for someone who was transgender. Why would I say no?
Hmm.
Because if I believe that I've created a platform of love, because again, to me, smiles and kindness goes back to love. So I don't then judge someone just because they're from Canada, from Israel, from the Middle East. I don't care. I don't care where you are. I often jokingly say and laugh, someone of a higher calling will do that at some point. We're living in very unique times.
Hmm.
Um, and would tell you that, you know, I'm not defined by the leaders of countries and how we treat people. And I guess to kind of put a bow on some of this, and maybe you have a follow-up question, there are things that Trump is doing, even though I voted for him, that I don't believe in and don't think are right. Because our leaders are not perfect, but yet sometimes we get so we think we're defined by our ideology. And in a lot of cases, it's what separates us. I'm still going to do it because I believe in the simplicity of love, and I'll let
Hmm.
somebody else do the judging.
You've answered my next question, by the way. My next question was, how do we maintain friendships when we are so divided politically? But I think we got two different issues here. Number one is families that are divided over the ideology and over the vote. That's one thing. Your president is wanting our country to join yours, and just said he probably won't use like army, violent physical force. That is huge. And the other thing is, we now have tariffs on things that were always free traded. So part of our issue is math. Like, it's not just ideology, it's like the math involved on that and the fear. And so I think that those are two very, very different things of
And I
ideologies.
don't
and
disagree. Yeah.
and we've got factories now shut down. I've got a friend whose business is crumbling, that he's trying to retire, and it's a mess because of what has been done fiscally, right? And with the tariffs. And so, and I've been in a quandary, because I will tell you, there's a strong call to not purchase American because of what has happened with the tariffs, and because of this rhetoric of Canada's going to join the US. We are a whole separate country, always have been. So that one for me, I maybe even grapple with more, because there is a call out, and there's a very fine line between not buying strawberries and animosity. Very fine line.
Oh, absolutely. And I think a lot of times, again, when I talk about the natural response of smiling, I think, again, that animosity builds up.
Mm-hmm.
When I go put water on the stove, it takes time to boil.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Um, so, I mean, again, I think we find ourselves living in a unique time. I don't think, again, even though I supported him, that he has all the answers and everything that he says in his positions are correct. But I also do understand fiscally, and primarily when I say I'm a conservative for a few issues. And I think that, and I don't know how it's up north, but fiscally speaking, I don't think the government should be there to solve all of our problems.
Mm.
And we have found here in the States, I'll separate it a little bit, we're in massive debt.
Mm-hmm.
We have uncontrolled spending. So at what point in what generation is this economy going to collapse?
Mm-hmm.
We take that for granted. Now, again, I don't think Trump's the savior. If you ask me from an ideological perspective, because there are conservatives in this country, when you remove yourself from the highest office, which is the president, and you now go, I don't care where you are, the parliament or here, Congress, there are a lot of people that are corrupted
Mm-hmm.
because they're bought and paid.
Mm-hmm.
And there are historically even fiscal conservatives who I chose to vote for at one point that I wouldn't vote for anymore because I
Yeah.
don't think they have the interests of their citizens, at hand. Do I think Trump is a loon in some respects, thinking, Canada's going to be the 51st state? Absolutely. No different than Greenland. What the hell is this guy thinking? But yet, I think he has some ideas that make sense in wanting to reform
Mm-hmm.
North America. And I'm in the middle on tariffs. I really am, because the one thing we are here too is we're overtaxed insanely to the point where it's not just the income tax that might be 28% or 35%. It's all the other taxes and probably somewhere near 50 to 60% of our wages.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
At what point is that enough? I don't think Canada's our problem. I honestly think, and I hate to say this publicly, it's probably more China, where has created this unfair trade balance
Mm-hmm.
from cheap labor that is a bigger issue than Mexico or Canada. But historically speaking, generationally, a lot of jobs have gone overseas that should have been here, that should have been in the States.
It's so complicated. So we were
And
in,
one of the things that does impact here
yeah.
that's very real is, so when you talk about strawberries and things, 97% of the brown water, which is called bourbon,
Mm-hmm.
comes from my state.
Mm.
And there are now issues, and that industry is starting to see a little bit of a struggle because of some tariffs.
Michael, so I lived in Jordan for 2 years in the Middle East, and we were just there. I told you this before. And I will say a common denominator that I have seen consistently in developing countries is me first. I don't consider others. For example, garbage. Oh my gosh. Garbage, the garbage, we were closer to the Syrian border. I actually took photos of the garbage. It's shocking. We would watch like McDonald's bags just getting thrown out of the window. Or traffic circles. You're supposed to wait. Like there's a queue and you wait and we know how it works. If you have 2 inches, you're going to move. And so it'll get gridlocked because I can do this. And I have found I will stand by this the day I die. The common denominator I have seen in countries that are developing is it is me first. And when we start entering territory where I am first in this world and everything we do is about me, we are aligning with what I feel is mindset and theory and practices, and then that actually, put into place in countries that are not developed. And I said because I was in the middle of this for 2 years, is that they will never get ahead until you're more outwardly thinking. And U.S. aid is gone. I said this was the best branch of the U.S. government. I can tell you what's happening in Gaza and Palestine right now is horrific.
Is it the U.S.'s responsibility to fund most of the endeavors around the world?
So,
because generally speaking, and you can rewind at least to World War II, we have funded with dollars and lives. And that's a very, very real thing too.
Yeah.
So at what point is that going to shift, and it's hard because I make love, not war. I'm a firm believer in that, and I would tell you maybe historically most conservatives probably are for conflict. But the most relevant recent one is at what point when we're $36 trillion in debt, do we quit sending, whatever the number is? It's somewhere between, 500 billion and $1 trillion. At what point have we given enough when the homelessness problem in this country is rampant? We can't save everybody. My whole platform has been about helping the less privileged,
right.
to some extent.
Yeah.
I've done that, but also sit there and tell you, we whatever the number is, I don't know, 10, 20, 30 million illegals. And the difference is instead of seeking asylum somewhere else in the world, we're funding it. we were funding it and we were
Mhm.
giving them money. So at what point, again, does humanity figure out, we can't be the only ones?
I think it's a huge existential crisis of what's the balance and where's the balance of thinking inwardly and protecting your own and thinking outwardly
You're not
and
wrong. Yeah,
protecting the world.
absolutely.
I understand. I know that. I know the mindset. I mean, yeah. At any rate, what I
And I
love.
and I
Yeah.
tried to. What's funny is, when you've created a platform that is all about smiling
Yeah.
and kindness and love, it doesn't matter who or what you believe in. And I've always had views, but I don't use those views to form
Yeah.
judgment.
Well, and that's just
But
so I
we
like what you
do.
said. I liked what you said about like
Yeah.
how so look at us. Like I had assumed you voted for Trump, by the way. Like I had assumed you're in
Yes.
Kentucky, you're a Christian, you're that area. And
And there's
I
probably a two-thirds or three-fourths chance when those things collide that someone did. So yeah.
Yeah, totally. And so I like what you said because I like, so what do we do with that? Because you and I both want a connected world and an authentically connected world, and where relationships matter, and we don't want dissension. And I like those daily encounters, like those moments. And I like what you said about that. Well, judgment, but also we're still all human beings on this earth together. We're still all humans together.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the one story I tell a lot as it relates to this is, so here in the States, I don't know what percentage of your audience is Canadian or American, but if you're in Vancouver, maybe a little bit of both. But, we have a Supreme Court. And for such a long time, when I say long time, almost a generation, for 30 years, Justice Ginsburg and Justice Scalia, who were on that, were polar opposites on social issues, primarily abortion. But yet, you know what? They were insanely close friends.
Right.
Their families were like family. So how do you get to that point to where even on those hot button issues, whether it's tariffs, abortion, again, we can go through a litany of things.
Yeah.
Do we separate that? Because we have found this space even more so now because of Trump in 2016, where families are divided, to where
Yeah.
families are not even speaking to each other just because, again, haven't done anything else, haven't treated you any differently, but I am now going to judge you, and therefore then I can't associate myself with you. It is a problem.
But I get how polarizing it is.
Yeah.
I've had a glimpse. Okay. I always do 3 wrap-up questions to kind of take us back to this, goal of how we connect more and just, your Smile project and finding these connections in Trumps and tariffs. And my first question is actually, I want to take it back to you. What is it that you think made you so catchy? You've got a huge LinkedIn audience. I saw you're close to 56,000. You've got news articles, you've got videos. I watched you on the news. What is it, like at a deeper cellular level, that makes people glom on to what your work is?
I think there's a couple of things. So the thing that I always wanted to do, because at times I would occasionally get the troll that would go, well, why did you video that? Why did you have to do a random act of kindness and video it? I took vanity and analytics out of it. And I often said when I did something, I'm looking to impact 2 people. I'm looking first to impact the person that I was with in person. That's the most important piece. Because again, that's in the moment, real time.
Yeah.
So I'm looking to somehow impact that person's life. With video, I'm looking to impact, and again, I go back, like I said, I went through a Wendy's drive-thru. So I'm trying to impact someone watching. But as my thing evolved, this is what I will leave you with. And that is, I started asking human beings, what makes them amazing? Because I believe in self-love, and I believe in that we all bring something amazing and beautiful to this world. And sometimes when life gets to be a bitch, it's hard. I mean, insanely hard. We forget that. We forget about self-love, and we find ourselves in dark, depressive places. So flipping the script, and what makes me amazing, and answering your question is, I have the innate ability to connect with strangers in an authentic manner immediately. So when I'm with that one person, they feel loved immediately. And then when somebody watches, they just know it's a dude that's gone through a lot, that loves people, and they can feel it.
You're meeting the human connection that we all need. Like that's why people grab that's the right. That's you're just drawing that in of I desperately need connection, and here's this moment in time that I have that.
We all want to be loved.
Yep.
I think at our core we're born that way, and we get away from it. We all want to love and be loved.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, here's my wrap up question number 2. What words do you have to say in like summarize, like you've answered it, but I want a summary of what do we do in this critical time right now with broken relationships over our politics in our countries?
It's a hard place to get to. And again, I think it's no different when I've talked about when you're trying to find optimism, love, any of those things is what can you do intentionally day in and day out. So
I like that.
Again, I'll give real examples. I'm the oldest of 7 kids, and myself and my siblings are fractured to some extent because even though I haven't treated them any differently, because I voted for somebody, therefore things have changed. So what I would tell you then is do things that are purposeful. I don't love my sister any less. She made that conscious choice to separate from those who didn't, let's say, vote for Hillary or voted for Trump. So what I would do is I would start to consume things that are beautiful about my sister. And if you continue to reinforce those behaviors and those attitudes about what you love about your sister, or I don't care who it is, and it doesn't have to be a sibling, because in a lot of cases it's not. You will reinforce that behavior.
That's good.
That a lot of Americans, even though we may believe that some may believe in tariffs or Trump, I think a large percentage have love and affinity for our neighbors up north. That it gets convoluted. So again, when I wanted to kill myself in 2014, I started consuming things daily that would be positive reinforcement in my life. So I get to the point now, and I said something to my daughter a couple of years ago. I said, baby, I don't have bad days. I have bad moments. I don't allow those things to control me. So therefore, then, if all I do is become fixated and intoxicated on my sister and what she believes, hate builds.
Yeah. I didn't realize, Michael, that you had fractured relationships when I asked you to do this interview.
And as you asked me, what can I not ask? And I said, ask anything, because I believe we need to have open, honest, real conversations to where we can still love people even though we may not agree.
Here's wrap up question number 3. This one I was preparing and it just popped into my yes, this is my last question. You ready for this?
Excited.
You ready for this? How would the world be? What would this world be like and act and do and behave if everybody was Maddie?
I mean, I think in some form or fashion, if anybody is still listening, has listened the entire time, I've kind of, walked through a handful or a litany of those things in which, it would be hard to imagine a world without conflict.
Yeah.
A world without, intentional death. Where we probably give, and, we briefly talked at times about selfishness. Look, if anybody is listening, and a lot of times when I talk about faith, I try to stay on that side of that. Look, to some extent, most of our audience, not everybody, has some form of Christianity, but, to me, it's heaven, because to me, heaven is a place glorious enough that it's infinite love without the conflict and the hate.
That would be it. Yeah.
So if you're living in a constant state of that, then we worry about nothing. Again, I said earlier, I don't have to worry about what's for dinner in 2 hours. Well, baby, I don't want chicken. We got chicken. Again, it just becomes simple.
Yeah. I love the simplicity. Michael Ray, smiling. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks very much.
It's a two-way street.
Lovely to chat with you.
I'm blessed by you, so thank you.
Thanks for watching. If you want to share this with somebody who needs to hear it, share away, and you can subscribe to this channel to get more videos like this, and you can click on those little links below for other ones to watch.